Amara Hopa, Yate Apene, Danjo, Keshi. ¿Cómo está? And howdy, y'all. In honor of our ancestors, I greet you in the various languages from my Keres people as well as Navajo Apache. And New Mexico is a very diverse state, as many of you may be aware, and particularly those that are visiting. Uh, Good morning, everyone. And I want to thank certainly Stacy and Kara for allowing this opportunity to provide you some opening remarks. I'm truly honored to speak about something that clearly is near and dear to me as with you as well. Um, I wanted to let you know first, and I apologize in advance that after I get done here, I'm going to have to rush off to Santa Fe. I am not always in control of my schedule. My governor asked me to be there this morning by 10, so I believe I can make it. But as was provided to you, I've served as a tribal leader for my tribe on 3 occasions, beginning in 2003. But actually, I've been involved in tribal government numerous activities since around 1983 in other leadership capacities. And as Stacy mentioned, I'm currently the vice chair of the 6 Middle Rio Grande Pueblos Water Coalition, which is made up of 6 Pueblo tribes along the Middle Rio Grande corridor from Isleta, just south of us, all the way to Cochiti Pueblo, which is about 40 miles directly north of us. Many of the issues that we deal with are certainly in an arid southwest issues of water quantity as well as quality and the things that impact quality of water upstream and certainly in our own reservation land. But as was mentioned, I've been involved with many tribes here in New Mexico, actually all 22 tribes, as well as the 22 tribes in Arizona in various capacities. And probably something that has become quite natural for me is the issues surrounding environmental protection and resource conservation as well as protection. If I may, let me share with you an important philosophy that I've tried to live by on all matters of decision making related to protection and revitalization of our natural resources. And it's the theme of this conference is so appropriate. Advancing riparian restoration in the West certainly is one of those things that we have undertaken in recent years. This philosophy, if I may, even though it has particular importance to Native people, and hopefully I'll provide you an insight to some of the things that we're having to deal with, but I think it has application to the larger setting, and the scope, I think, can be appropriately increased. Let me just momentarily deviate and share with you a little bit of what my life has been and where this important philosophy may have begun, and making sure that I give credit to those important people in my life that have contributed in enlightening me. Certainly, as with all of us, our parents are significant influences in our lives in many ways, but for me, probably the most important lessons that I've learned in life came from my grandfathers. Both my grandfathers were medicine men in our tribe. As such, I was greatly honored to accompany them at a young age as I was growing up, as we traveled to the mountains to gather a lot of the medicinal plants, as well as many things that they shared with me in terms of the knowledge of plants, the importance of animal life and its relations to all of us, and this whole connectedness about nature and everything that we hold near and dear to us. And certainly that has influenced my decision making as a tribal leader for my tribe. But for me, probably the most biggest message that I, as I surmise all of this wonderful opportunities that my grandfathers provided to me, is the important message and the important legacy that we must leave behind for our children and even the children that are yet to come, and that they deserve from us the inheritance of a healthy environment. Uh, so it's not easy to understand that the decisions that we make today will certainly impact the outcome of the future. And I certainly want to thank all of you at this time for engaging in the work that you do, because it's important to all of us. And hopefully with the insight to what I'm about to provide you will also help breed the need for us to begin to collaborate, work together even more so, because this is about all of us, not just the tribes. Unfortunately for tribes, it's a little bit more magnified in some areas, and I'll share that with you. As I've engaged my tribe and others in strategic planning initiatives, I'm constantly reminded that it's critical and imperative that tribes are keenly aware and cognizant of the important reality and fact. And this is driven by the laws of the land that's been enacted over the last couple, 300 years where it relates to tribes. And particularly for tribes, we are now strictly confined in prescribed land bases that we currently occupy. And even though many of us have been engaged in the reacquisition of much of our Aboriginal lands, we're never going to be back to the size we were at one time. And so for us, we literally, if you help me envision this in your minds, we literally live on islands. And so we have fixed land bases and certainly fixed natural resources. The challenge has been how we manage these resources in the midst of necessary natural, economic, and human resource development efforts that the tribe are now aggressively engaged in, all in an effort to become more self-sustaining, self-supporting as we pursue our many important initiatives. For those of you that may not be aware, and I'm very specific to New Mexico, but I see this actually going on throughout the country, that tribes today probably are having the largest economic growth. Economic development is really thriving, but comes with that other challenges. Like here in New Mexico, the state and the tribes are clearly important partners in this whole important initiative of making sure that this state's economic engine prospers, because our tribes are important partners in many ways, but I'll share a few of them with you. Most of you, if you're familiar with New Mexico, anywhere you travel in the state, our interstates go through tribal lands. Many of our major power transmission lines go through tribal lands. Our high pressure gas lines, rail systems, much of the communications, information technology infrastructure also go through tribal lands. So for us as tribes, and hopefully our efforts in the past have been to help the state understand that we are vested partners in the tribes and in the state's well-being. So this is something that I think sometimes isn't as apparent as it should be. In the midst of all of this, tribes have the challenge of balancing important natural human resource development initiatives because of our continuing reliance and intimate connections to Mother Earth and her resources. And I'll share a few of these for those of you that may not be aware. Today, tribes continually and are actively engaged in the consumption of wildlife and plants for food. We still do that. We hunt animals. We also still eat the wild plants that Mother Nature has provided to us. In terms of our culture and the support and continuation of our cultures, tribes are intimately connected to all its natural resources. I spoke about the medicinal plants, but here in the Southwest, if you know, constantly, if you go into the store here, you'll see the wonderful things that our people make, from pottery to jewelry and all of that. So if you look at pottery, it's made of clay, that our people still go out and collect clays to do that. Thus the importance of environmental protection. Pueblos, especially in the Middle Rio Grande Valley here, continue to farm and depend on our water resources, particularly to meet the myriad of community needs, including the sustaining of our cultural practices. As you might agree, water is clearly the lifeblood to our tribal communities as well as this state. and its importance goes well beyond our economic purposes or benefits. Therefore, it is incumbent on tribes to always have a paramount priority protecting all our water or natural resources on the small islands that we live on. With the limited land bases and resources, we cannot afford to appropriate resources beyond our means, but more importantly, make environment protection, resource protection central strategic priorities as we plan for current initiatives as well as the future. Again, I can't say enough thanks to many of you that are working in this field that you are in looking at all of our riparian restoration initiatives. But since 2003, our tribe, Giwa, has spent at least $5 million in efforts to date, pursuing proactive efforts to make sure that this is made our part of our tribal priority. And the important thing is that it's driven by our people. That incorporates all of our philosophical views as well as the cultural considerations that have to be made. Now, federal agencies decades ago introduced many different plants and practices to address bank stabilization and controlling flood and erosion problems. In doing so, I think not many at the time probably gave much thought to the long-term impacts of our lands and water resources. The introduction of invasive species to our reservation lands, such as the tamarisk and Russian olive trees, quickly became something that was hard to manage, particularly here in the arid Southwest. Main tributaries to the Rio Grande, such as the Rio Galisteo, were covered bank to bank with tamarisk and Russian olives, and extended well beyond and upstream in those larger watersheds beyond our reservation boundaries. The natural habitats changed dramatically because of the perennial waters that used to flow in these tributaries, fed by natural springs, dried up. And while the intent to controlling flood threats within the Rio Grande corridor south of Cochiti, for those of you that don't know, Cochiti Dam is about 40 miles upstream of us north. The subsequent adverse impacts that have been felt by the tribes have become even more magnified for us. And I say these things with respect and not to judge or diminish the good intent that was part of the conversation back then, but more from the perspective of what we must do to address and correcting what we didn't know at the time or enough thought in regarding to the long-term impacts. Because most of you know that many of these invasive species proliferate beyond one's imagination. For those that may not be familiar with the Rio Grande corridor below Cochiti Dam, we have had serious problems with seepage because that's a huge river to hold back, and for many years seepage was a prominent problem from Cochiti Pueblo all the way to Santo Domingo or Kiwa. And it took many years for the Corps of Engineers to address that and mitigate that to where we've been able to restore our farmlands. In addition, downstream of the dam, miles of the river's natural meander and flows were eliminated. And this was because they built these rock reinforced walls that created literally raceways for the water to flow directly below the river, which took out all of the natural meanders and certainly the habitat and the riparian areas that it affected. In addition, if you can imagine that if you hold a huge column of water, the lower columns generally are colder than the upper ones, and so the outlets for the dam certainly come from the lower columns of the water, and so it literally changed for miles below the dam the fisheries from a warm water to a cold water. So those were also impacted, and because the raceways that were created, the natural meander and the periodic spring flooding were completely eliminated. So again, that impact our riparian areas. So without the spring flooding, we didn't have any new growth of cottonwoods and willows and all of that. So the tribe has undertaking a huge project by replanting and creating environments where we're still trying to pursue artificial flooding, and so that we could ensure that we had new growth of cottonwoods, because right now most of what's growing below there is all old growth. Um, as I mentioned, our pueblo has put a tremendous amount of human and monetary resources and effort to address the invasive species within the Rio Grande riparian areas, but as well the effort to eradicate Tamarisk from our main tributaries that have a confluence with the river. Um, and it's quite expensive. In 2003, I was chastised by my tribal council because we had the assistance of I believe they're called the Association of Conservancy Districts, that provided the money for us to undertake a tamarisk eradication project, because I jumped on a helicopter that was landing on the back of a truck that refueled, and we were flying around, actually applying um, the herbicides to help us kill the tamarisk. I was told not to get on the helicopter again. That was fun, though. And it was amazing using modern technology. We were able to see live exactly where we were applying it via GIS and GPS capability. In addition, we've also undertaken the effort to restore our riparian areas by replanting of cottonwoods. We've got some new areas that we've dedicated to this, and also willows. We still have a good amount of work to do, because in some areas, if you might imagine, I'm sure all of you know how expensive it is to bring in equipment to either completely uproot or remove, or just to use machinery that just basically pulverizes the trees. But we're still working on areas, especially the Rio Grande corridor has very few, and ours is particularly a unique wetland that has been there since time immemorial, and we'd like to keep it that way, but now it's completely overtaken by Russian olives, so we still have yet to do that. I want to share with you that was perhaps the biggest thing that our tribe has done as part of the larger reservation-wide restoration efforts, because this we anticipated to be the most controversial but most important, was to impose some moratoria on a number of things. One was to prevent public access by our own tribal members to all our reservation lands, and including hunting, because many of us noticed that our rangeland as well as our natural resources was being depleted by our own people, including wildlife. So but we had to honestly take a look at what we were doing ourselves as part of our own human internal impacts, as well as the practices that was being regularly practiced in terms of harvesting wood products, forest products. When I was growing up, we used to walk to the wood, chop it down, haul it back. Now everybody in their 4x was driving all over our reservation. So that really depleted the grasslands and the integrity of the grasslands. And then with the human impacts, accelerated our erosion. And a lot of the sediments showed up at the farmlands that are downstream of these areas. I think for us, we were just being brutally honest with ourselves and recognizing that livestock and human impacts were also contributing to the degradation of riparian areas, decreases in wildlife population, and severe overgrazing of our rangelands. In 2009, the tribe began fencing off river bottom access, where thinning and replanting of cottonwoods and willows were taking place. We've also aggressively had to face up to the livestock owners, and so we forced them to reduce livestock on the rangelands, and again closing off access to all reservation lands for everyone. As I mentioned, vehicle, livestock, and human access all contributed to the increasing problem of erosion. Now, we're very fortunate that we've already begun to see the fruits of our labor. because we have people from our Natural Resources Department monitoring wildlife, game. We certainly, especially big game, is something that the tribe depends on for its cultural purposes. But and then even our waterfowl, and even rangeland improvements. But to ensure that we continue along this path, the tribe just last year extended that moratoria on all of these activities for another 5 years. So I think that was a very courageous decision because when it comes to taking away free access, as we've all always enjoyed um, from our people, it was a little bit, we anticipated they were going to get some pushback. We did, but surprisingly, people embraced it after a while. It was nice to see our people supporting what we were doing. And so I expect that we're going to continue along that path, hopefully for many more years to come. I want to make sure that I share this with you, being a part of the Water Coalition. The issues that we deal with are broadening as time goes by. I know that in the last presentation that the coalition, um, um, the Tamarisk Coalition provided to our tribal leaders was important because um, jokingly we were saying, never did I ever think that we would want the tamarisk bug or whatever that uh, helps with removing or killing those tamarisk plants. But um, this issue is not just about tribes. And for many of us that are non-gaming tribes, it's a challenge because we don't have the resources, all the resources that we'd like to see to direct in the direction of restoration of all of our important riparian areas, but the other important parallel initiatives that have to come with it. So for me, I think we really certainly need more collaboration with all the entities that we can work with, be it private, nonprofit, state, or federal, because this is an issue that is important to all of us. And particularly, I'm also a farmer. My summer vacations were spending the entire summer with my grandfathers, learning about farming and the important cycles and connectedness that I was so blessed to having learned from them. And for those few non-believers that don't think global warming is an issue, as a farmer, there's noticeable differences in the farming cycles now. All of these things. So this is something that we have to work together. For those of you that aren't farmers, what you're doing is equally important because now we're all competing for a valuable resource called water and many of these invasive plants. And certainly the restoration of these riparian areas adds significantly to all our health. And so in closing, I want to thank the Tamarisk Coalition, Stacy, and certainly Kara and many others for inviting me to share some thoughts with you today. And certainly, without question, some of us leaders come up with the ideas, the initial ideas, but many of you probably are engaged in some shape or form or interconnecting with our tribal natural resources departments. But I also want to do a shout out for many of our people that are in those capacities that really do the work on the ground. And I think many of you are on the ground people, as I can see, and I want to thank you for that, for doing the work that you do. But again, as I mentioned, the importance of overall environmental health has a direct positive impact to human health. And so we must do this together. So as you partake in this event, I plan to be back this afternoon. I want to fully engage with you all and hopefully get a chance to meet many of you. But I also, in looking forward to the planned site visits that you're going to be doing, I think Santa Ana was one of them. I don't know if Sandia was one of the other pueblos. You'll see the tremendous amount of effort that have taken place in our pueblos that um, is proactively involved in doing something about restoration or riparian areas. So I hope you enjoy those field trips. I probably will join you in one of them. But again, I apologize. I have to leave to head to Santa Fe. But um, thank you so much for having me. I appreciate your attention. And so thank you. Good morning again.